right, let's move to the work of the committee, the Economics Committee, and this inquiry into the dynamism and competition in these key areas, and in particular supermarkets, because that's one area, if there is a lack of competition, then there's a lack of price pressure to prevent profits and therefore prices being pushed higher. What are you seeing inside the committee?
So, look, I should say that we've only just started looking at this sector, and it's a complicated sector. But we heard evidence from Woolworths and Coles yesterday. We also heard from Metcash, which gave us insights from the independent growers. So, first and foremost, look, we've started to seek evidence from the big chains in particular as to their margins, their EBITDA and their profit rates over the last decade or so. What we're really interested in looking at is how have those profit margins changed over time. So, for example, did the entry of Aldi do anything to those profit margins? And what have those profit margins look like post-COVID? So we've really only just started to seek that evidence. We'll receive that evidence in a few weeks, and I think that will be very insightful. What we want to see is that supermarkets are not raising prices above and beyond the input price increases that they're experiencing. The other thing I'd say is that we received what I thought was really interesting evidence when it came to some of the upstream providers, so a lot of the providers of food, some of the manufactured foodstuffs. So there's real issues when you have market concentration at the supermarket level in terms of uneven bargaining processes, potentially. And so those were really interesting perspectives that were added by the National Farmers Federation and the Australian food and grocery industry. So those were perspectives that we'll also add in. And finally, I would just add that we received some interesting evidence from the independent grocers. And when you go to regional areas, there are some regional centres where they only have an independent grocer providing supermarket services. So, you know, there were some issues that had arisen when the big four banks gave evidence and also a lot of the regional banks. I think there's a range of interesting issues in relation to the provision of supermarket services to regional communities that we need to think through as well.
OK, just one thing I want to go to, and that is Australia's known as the land of the great duopoly. You know, two, maybe three competing in any one industry. Airports, airlines are one other area as well. Peter Harris, the former Productivity Commissioner, gave evidence about this. The notion of slot farming, that they farm these slots to prevent competition coming in. Does that worry you?
Well, I think he gave very interesting evidence, and he'd written a report on this, of course. So Peter Harris is a former chair of the Productivity Commission, as you note. He wrote a report a couple of years ago, has extensive experience in aviation. And what he said was, on a few fronts, we need to, I think, have a close look at the way that, for example, the morning peak slots at Sydney Airport in particular are allocated. So I think that he would make the argument that the way they're currently allocated is skewed against new entrants, that it's too easy for incumbents to retain their slots, even if they're cancelling quite a high proportion of flights, and that there isn't sufficient monitoring. So he talked about the need to invest more in the auditing, or the monitoring of the way in which those slots are being managed. Are cancellations being done cynically or due to other factors? So I think a lot of those things do need to be looked at.
Yes, indeed. Daniel Mulino, good to have you on the program. We'll do it again shortly. Many thanks for your time.